It was a really uncharacteristic game for Man City at the Etihad, wasn't it? Losing 4-0 to a Tottenham team who have been so up and down, I think it's fair to say. Before this game, they'd won 5 and lost 5. So it was literally all or nothing for them. This afternoon against Man City, it was an all occasion with that guy who we were almost criticising last week, James Maddison, taking centre stage. But it was an all-round great performance from everyone in the team for Spurs, wasn't it? And before we look at kind of City's shortcomings and, their tough run of form of late, City were only as bad as Tottenham were good, really. Every single player seemed to play their part, didn't they?
Definitely. And to be honest, I think before this game, I think a lot of people expected City to come out the traps. That is probably the best game I've seen them play as a unit. And I think from, every single name on that team sheet, you've got to say they did their job to perfection. And it was almost the perfect performance. It might not have been the best performance in terms of, I think, fluidity, in terms of some of the attacking play. I think it was more of in spells. But we've seen that over the years against City. You have to pick your moments. And especially in that first half, Tottenham were just absolutely clinical.
Yeah.
And it was written in the stars it was going to be James Maddison to come in. And let's be honest, it's vintage Maddison, wasn't it? It's just something we've not seen him pull out of the bag too often since he's arrived at Spurs. He had that really great start to his Spurs career and he's fallen off a little bit since then. But to see him come in and do that, it's just great to see. Because he's just an absolute maverick, isn't he? And he loves causing absolute havoc in those positions. I think he really toyed, with that City defence and midfield at times in those holes. And just to see him on those marauding runs, countless times, especially in the second half when they were looking to counter, it's more of what we expect from him, I think.
Yeah, I think the way that he finished his goals, especially Maddison, was incredible. Like his little dink over the goalkeeper was really hard to pull off. His technique is brilliant. But we know that, don't we? We said in the last pod in his defence that his technical ability is superb. It's just whether he fits into the balance of this Tottenham team at certain times. But this particular Tottenham setup was set up perfectly for him. And I think he was a real beneficiary of obviously Son finding him for that pass as well for that goal. I think the fullbacks look great for Spurs as well. Padre Porro is such a threat on the break. And I think the counter for Spurs was one of the key ingredients to this game going the way it did. Like, I think Man City looked really lethargic tracking back. In fact, I didn't see many of their players tracking back. But then Spurs was so good at transitioning when they got the ball that it was up to a player like Maddison to finish it off, and he did. But all of Spurs' goals were brilliant, weren't they, really? But who stood out for you in this Spurs team? We said Maddison. But out of the rest of the team, who else do you think played their part?
I think Pape Sarr had a really good game. That's probably one of the best games I've seen.
He is the balance, isn't he? I think that midfield needs someone like him. Positionally,
I think that midfield got it perfectly. And I think as soon as they went 2-0 ahead, you looked at that midfield setup and positionally, their awareness was brilliant. And they plugged those holes and ensured that City couldn't get through them. City were looking to kind of go down the outside. They had no choice, really. And I think they didn't really have the players in that team to be able to do that, aside from probably Savinho, who I don't think had his best game. I think a better player to suit that kind of way of playing, if you go looking to go down flanks, is Jack Grealish, who obviously came on the back end of the second half. But they really found it difficult to get through that Tottenham midfield in defence. And I was actually a little bit worried for Spurs at the start of the game when I saw Ben Davies and Dragusin starting, who I thought performed brilliantly, to be honest. I think Dragusin, since he's come in, has had a little bit of a tough time at times in this game and lacked, obviously, struggled for minutes. But to see him come in and perform like that, I mean, Haaland was largely anonymous. There's a couple of brilliant chances he had, which, he really struggled with, to be honest. But aside from that, it was quite quiet on the whole.
When they're good, they're great, aren't they? And I think the key player for me, and we mentioned this on the pod before, is Dejan Kulusevski. He's just a relentless runner. And I think the City backline really struggled to deal with his ingenuity. And when he gets the ball, he always looks for that forward pass. He always looks to run at the players. Kyle Walker had an absolutely torrid time against whoever he came up against, really. But I think Kulusevski was one of those like magicians that really set the pace for the team. And I can't see him not starting for Spurs now. I know we've sung his praises in the past, but Kulusevski's awesome, isn't he? What a player.
Yeah, I think his link-up play is so underrated, I think. And for a player with his engine as well, just completely runs all game. I think what he does allow is he he allows the likes of Brennan Johnson, who had a bit of a rough time, I think, from Spurs fans before his purple streak that he had. It takes a little bit of pressure off his shoulders. I think it's the same with Maddison. Like, they shouldn't be looking to I think criticise some of their youngest players. This team they've all been equally guilty, I think, of underperforming and probably not reaching their levels at times, as we've seen with James Maddison and Kulusevski. He's blown hot and cold at time, but we've seen now it seems like he's really hitting his stride. And yeah, I just it's interesting, isn't it, to see what the level of this Spurs side could be.
That's the conundrum, yeah.
That's the thing now is. I was just thinking to myself last night. I was thinking, who Spurs got next? And it just makes you think of obviously when they beat United, and then obviously went and lost to Brighton next game, didn't they? After being 2-0 up.
Yeah, lost to Ipswich as well along the way. Like, their wins have been amazing, but their defeats have been so poor. But then they've tended not to lose by more than like a goal. So it's not like it's a complete catastrophe for them. It's only like a goal or so in it. But sometimes the nature of the defeat is what kind of stands out the most, isn't it? But the nature of their victories has been incredible. So an amazing performance from the whole of the Spurs team, which is